Welcome to BIV Today, the podcast from the Newsroom of Business in Vancouver. I'm Kirk LaPointe, publisher and executive editor. Our guest today is Roberto Velasco Alvarez, the Chief Officer for North America at the Mexican Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We have, of course, a great deal to talk about involving Canada-Mexico relationships. For that ministry, though he oversees the country's foreign policy with Canada and the United States, he's visiting Vancouver here for the first time. A lawyer by profession, a former editor-in-chief of the Chicago Policy Review, former staffer in the office of then Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel. He also worked as the head of the Foreign Ministry's General Director for Public Affairs. And also joining our discussion today, good to have BIV reporter Nelson Bennett, who looks at trade and energy issues for us. Welcome so much. Welcome to Vancouver.
Thank you so much, Kirk, and really happy to be able to join you in this podcast.
Let's talk a bit, get a bit of a status report on what you consider to be the general relationships, the bilateral relationships with the two countries, the challenges, the accomplishments. Set the scene a bit for us.
Yes, of course. Well, let me start by saying that we believe we are at a really important time of the relationship with Canada. Last year, for the first time, Canadian companies became the number 2 largest foreign direct investors in Mexico after the United States. So that was very positive. Some of the projects that are happening are really exciting, like TC Energy building nearly $5 billion undersea pipeline in the Gulf of Mexico, Canadian Pacific purchasing Kansas City Southern, which will create or has created the first integrated North American transport and logistics platform, which will allow trade to keep growing. And also, in general, I feel a sense that obviously with all the uncertainty that we have around the globe, North America is not only back, but is making more sense than ever. And certainly Canada and Mexico have a lot of opportunities in front of ourselves, given this trend.
You're outlining, I think, the accomplishments and the opportunities. I wonder if you can talk a bit about what the challenges are. What are if there are such things as pain points in the relationship, what do you feel they are?
Well, as with every relationship, when you start growing the trade between the countries, there will also be points of tension. We've had some concerns, for example, in the energy sector. But last time that Prime Minister Trudeau went to Mexico City for the 10th edition of the NALS in January of this year, he had a very good conversation with our president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador. We agreed to take a look at some of the existing issues with energy companies. And I can tell you that in most of the cases, 3 out of 4 cases that were brought to our attention, we were able to reach a framework that solved the problem, and these solutions are already being implemented, and the companies are now, I would say, really comfortable with the situation. And in one more case, we are still discussing important aspects of negotiation to solve the existing concerns, but I am very optimistic that we will get there. There are always also, some points of friction in the mining sector. It's a difficult sector per definition around the world. Mining companies always have challenges dealing with the communities on environmental issues. And the Congress now approved a new law that I'm afraid probably will be challenged before our courts. So probably that means that there will be a constitutional revision or a judicial revision of the law. So we won't know the exact outcome for a while of this process. But certainly we're also talking with the Canadian companies and with the companies in the mining sector to understand if they have concerns and how we can work on those issues.
Yeah, so I hear a positive and optimistic climate that you're doing. I want to turn it over here to Nelson Bennett for a couple of questions. Nelson?
Yeah, I was just wondering I think some people might be surprised to learn that Mexico is getting in on the liquefied natural gas export sector. Might be surprising because Mexico doesn't produce a whole lot of natural gas. I believe it's getting most of its natural gas from the United States. But already we've seen here in Canada, we've got natural gas producers signing long-term contracts with American LNG producers in the Gulf Coast, specifically Cheniere Energy. Can you see a situation where Canadian natural gas producers would actually be exporting natural gas to Mexico to feed LNG projects there, or at least backfilling some of the natural gas in the United States?
Yeah, this is a really interesting question, Nelson. I think several things changed in the past couple of years on the natural gas and LNG market. Obviously, you have the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, which has created a completely new situation in the gas market in Europe. You have also a lot of demand growing in Asia, that you already had before, but obviously this is a trend that is very important for companies in North America in terms of exports. And you also have a realization around the world that the energy transition towards renewables will require gas as a bridge to get us there. So many companies are looking at different options of how they can make sure that they can get the natural gas that they need. And Mexico is certainly going to play an important role in this market. There are at least 3 very important projects under development in Mexico in this field. One by Sempra in the Pacific Coast. They are well underway in the construction of a really important liquefied natural gas plant, obviously using gas from the United States. There's a second one in that same area in the Cortez Sea in Sonora by Mexico Pacific Limited. And this will be actually a $14 billion plant that they want to develop. They just met with the president in Mexico City and had a very positive meeting. They are developing a partnership with our national electricity company, CFE. And in the Gulf of Mexico, you have New Fortress Energy working with our national oil company, Pemex, in partnership to develop a gas field that Pemex has in this area. They have reached an agreement on how they will exploit this gas and export it, and obviously liquefy it and export it. And they will also work to develop an additional liquefied natural gas plant in the Gulf. So lots going on, and certainly these plants will require important amounts of natural gas. A lot of it will come from the Permian Basin in the United States. But certainly, I believe there's an important space for Canadian companies to play a role. And as you said, either to backfill gas in the United States or to connect with this infrastructure. And I mentioned TC Energy's new undersea pipeline. And this might actually end up being another channel where liquefied natural gas would end up being produced to export.
And so, sir, you mentioned the TC Energy project. Is that directly tied to LNG projects?
Not right now,
okay.
But it's certainly one of the options that is being explored.
Okay.
If we can, I mean, obviously, I think I can answer part of this question almost myself and say that you have a distinct border situation with the United States that we don't really have. But I want to get your views on the respective relationships that each of us have with America and how, in your view, they differ.
Well, it's another very good question, too. Thank you. Obviously, the past few years with the United States have been years of, let's say, a lot of changes. We went to the Trump presidency, which actually didn't believe in the idea of North America. They wanted to go back to this idea of bilateral relationships with the two countries. Now we have the Biden administration that does want to have a North American policy. And to be honest, it's not just the Biden administration, it's also the global situation, the geopolitical situation that is bringing North America back. But certainly, I think what these years of uncertainty in the North American relationship showed is the importance of having a strong bilateral relationship between Mexico and Canada. It is certainly something that we need to keep fostering. And we saw during the pandemic and during the NAFTA renegotiation, and we are seeing now also with the nearshoring, that working together not only makes sense in terms of our respective relationships with the United States, but it also offers a lot of opportunities for companies in the two countries. And in terms of the relationship with the United States, obviously, we have several really tough issues that we're managing right now. You mentioned the border, and of course, we have a unique situation because we are a transit country for migrants. We are also a country of transit for different illicit products such as drugs. Particularly now we are concerned about fentanyl, which is an area that we're working with the United States to try and tackle. But there's a lot of dialogue every day and a lot of work every day, and a very intense level of cooperation. So we certainly believe that the relationship is strong and that we will be able to keep navigating these really thorny issues.
Yeah, the one area I think that people could point to during that Trump administration, that's obviously come into the Biden administration, was the evolution of NAFTA. And I wonder if you're able now to take a look at it a couple of years hence and determine whether it really was much of an evolution or was it mostly symbolic in nature. What are your views about how it has gone since it was last worked through, principally by the Trump administration trying to call the shots on it?
Well, I mean, if you take a look at the trade numbers between the three countries before and after the negotiation of NAFTA, you would certainly come to the conclusion that it's been a positive trend. We've had historic numbers of trade, even if you take into account the inflation. It's not just nominal, but real growth in terms of the trade of the three countries. So naturally, I mean, correlation is not causation, but certainly it seems like the new NAFTA is also creating really good conditions for our exports and imports to keep growing. And on the other hand, some issues that we sometimes expected that were going to be points of frictions have not been that way. You have, for example, the new labor provisions of the USMCA, and that certainly has not become a source of conflict for the three countries. It's actually working very well. And from our point of view, the new rules of origins provisions in the treaty actually incentivize companies to bring more production to North America, to bring larger parts of the supply chains to our own neighborhood. So we certainly think that's positive and it coincides with what we're seeing. I was telling a group that we just met that we are in a situation right now where industrial parks in Mexico have 99% of occupation, and we have waiting lists of over 300 companies that are trying to get space in industrial parks. And obviously, there are important Canadian companies in this sphere. You have investments by Bombardier, by DRP, by Martin Rea International. So it's an exciting moment, and it seems that the USMCA is obviously a part of that success.
Nelson?
Yeah, just on trade, whether it's the CUSMA or NAFTA, Canada has had a North American free trade agreement with Mexico for more than 30 years. And from British Columbia, from Vancouver to the port of Ensenada, it's only something like 1,300 nautical miles. It's about a quarter of the distance from some of our other trade partners like Taiwan or Japan or China. And yet, when you look at the numbers, the amount of trade that BC does with Mexico is really very low. I think imports, it's a little over $2 billion, but the exports from BC to Mexico is only something like $107 million in 2021. So it's quite surprising that it's that low. I'm just wondering if you see any opportunities going forward for increased trade either way between BC and Mexico. Are there things that Mexico would like to import from BC, for example, lumber or natural gas or copper?
I totally coincide with your point of view. I mean, Mexico is a large market. We are 130 million people, and we have a growing economy. We are a young country, and our projections is that our population is going to keep growing for some years. So it certainly represents a big opportunity for Canadian companies. And in the case of British Columbia, I think certainly we met, for example, today with the government and the provincial government, and we were discussing opportunities in biotech, which is growing here, technology in general. Obviously, you mentioned lumber. We were talking about mass lumber for construction. That could be another opportunity for trade. And in general, I would say that certainly, since we are seeing a trade that is still so small between, in general, Canada and Mexico, and particularly BC and Mexico, there's still a lot of room for growth. I think, the Mexico-Canada relationship has been probably the weakest element of the NAFTA relationship. And there's a lot more we need to do to make sure that we have a very strong partnership and that we are taking advantage of all the opportunities that we have between these two markets.
We just have a few minutes left, but I wanted to get your thoughts, and then I'll turn to Nelson for the last question, about the opportunities that exist in what you're telling Canadians as you visit are the common approaches to some global issues, and not just bilateral ones, not just continental ones, but global issues. Where do you see the opportunities here?
Well, first of all, we are countries that in many things, we are very much aligned. We are democracies. We believe in the multilateral system and in the rules-based global trade system. So those areas where we work together every day in the WTO, in the UN system. So we very much see eye to eye on that. And it's a rare occasion where the three governments in North America are progressive governments. So we care about equality, we care about inclusion, we care about Indigenous peoples and how we can promote a greater involvement in the economy of small and medium enterprises. We care about climate change, and we're working together as well on that. Mexico last year presented new nationally determined contributions or NDCs in the COP. And this is an area where we've been working with the US and Canada, for example, on methane emission reductions. So certainly there's more that we can do around there. And in general, I would say that, these are countries that in the basic things, we agree very much. We also have governments that agree in terms of a vision of our societies right now. So that's why we launched a new roadmap for the bilateral relationship in the years to come. And a big element of that was this idea of a shared or common value system between the two countries.
Okay, great. Nelson, let me give you the last question.
Okay. Well, one area where we do see investment from Canadian companies in Mexico and including BC companies is in the mining sector. There's a lot of gold and silver mining in Mexico, and we have a number of BC companies that would have invested there. But there have been some recent mining reform laws, or mining law reforms. I believe you might have touched on it. I'm just wondering if you could speak about that, because when, you know, companies hear that there might be changes to the length of the concessions, or requirements that some of the profits be given back to local communities, things like that, that might put a chill on investors. What can you say about that? Are you seeing an impact? Are you seeing a bit of a pullback by the Canadian investors in Mexico in the mining sector?
Well, we haven't really seen a pullback, but we certainly understand that there are concerns by some companies. Our Ministry of the Economy is talking with the companies. We're also working with the Canadian government to make sure that we understand these concerns and that we are able to find mutually agreeable solutions. And also, as I mentioned at the beginning, it's likely that there will be a judicial or constitutional revision process for these laws. So we will also wait and see what the courts resolve around these, so we can make sure that we attend the concerns as we have certainty regarding the laws and the regulation that will be applied.
It's been a great conversation, and I'm glad you finally got to visit Vancouver. Hope you'll come back many times. We'll see you again and chat again when you come again. Thanks a lot for your time today.
Well, thank you so much, Kirk, Nelson.
Thank you.
I'm Kirk LaPointe, publisher and executive editor at BIB. Thanks a lot for watching.